After 97 long days, it is finally time. This is Formula One qualifying with 20 of the best drivers in the world. Under the floodlights of Bahrain International Circuit, we meet again for the first qualifying session of the season. It is finally time to set the grid for the opening round of the Formula One World Championship in 2024. And today, around this circuit, we need some big questions answered. It is 5.4 kilometers, 3.3 miles, and 15 turns for the drivers to deal with. It is going to be a really interesting session because it looks like we are very evenly matched at the front of the field. It's the obligatory Pirelli tyre graphic for the C3, the C2 and the C1. We're going to be pushing laps at the limit on the soft tyres. Finally, it's low fuel, it's attacking, it's Formula One at its absolute finest. These are great pictures, these are great moments. Can anyone beat the Red Bulls? Will Mercedes show more strong pace over one lap? And who will avoid the dreaded back row of the grid? Those big questions are about to be answered. In the commentary box, my name is Alex Jakes, and this is Formula One Up and Running. We welcome you to commentary box 31. I'm Alex Jakes. This is David Coulthard, Jolyon Palmer. Ready, gentlemen, to do it all again.
Loving it. It was the shortest winter break ever, but the good news about that is we now get to go and not quite Grand Prix racing, we'll wait for that tomorrow, but we get to go and see who has come up with something magical and which driver can exploit that to their best advantage.
Jolyon, all the talk ends, the stopwatch will not lie in an hour's time.
I think I'm as excited for this as I will be for the Grand Prix tomorrow right now. It looks so close. We've looked through all the data from the testing last week at this circuit, 3 days of it, 3 one-hour practice sessions that we've had to this point, and still we think it's anyone's game in this qualifying hour. The fastest they'll go all weekend. And yeah, really excited to see how this shakes out.
That's former Renault Formula One driver Jolyon Palmer. I'm sitting next to David Coulthard, 13 times a Grand Prix winner. And whenever you are, it is great to have your company for this one because it is finally time to get some answers. That's what we want. We're going to get them. And we're going to see Lewis Hamilton out on the racetrack. There is the world champion, Max Verstappen, 3 World Championship trophies in his possession. But crucially, we start from scratch. We start anew. And Carlos Sainz, earlier on, was looking very, very handy in the Ferrari. He was the top driver in the final practice session. We've had 3 days of testing around this circuit. We've added the 3 practice sessions. You're looking at Fernando Alonso last year. What a resurgence for the 2-time world champion. He said he felt connected to the car earlier on. And when a driver of that talent feels connected to the car, the rest of the Formula One grid are going to have to produce something special.
I actually think he's been going through some sort of Benjamin Button anti-aging program because his skin is impeccable, not a wrinkle in sight, his motivation off the scale. And yeah, can anyone stop him extracting more out of that Aston than his teammate?
I need to know about that skincare routine. I agree, never better, unblemished. He's 42 years old, Fernando Alonso, and still looking hooked up in that Aston Martin, and it could be a threat yet in this one.
That's why we have you chaps in the box. That razor-sharp analysis. Excellent stuff. There's Charles Leclerc, ready to be called into the pit lane. His mechanic here gets a lot of airtime on social media as he calls him into the pit lane. The roar of V6 turbocharged engines heading into the fast lane of the pit lane. And queuing up, we are ready. It is very nearly 7 o'clock local time. The green light will illuminate at the end of the pit lane. Q1 is up and running. The Ferraris will lead us onto the racetrack. Ferrari hoping that they can continue their strong one-lap pace towards the end of last season into 2024.
I don't suspect it really matters at this first part of qualifying, especially for Ferrari, if they're first out or whether they wait a couple of minutes. But there is something significant, I think, for a driver on being the first one to roll out. It's kind of a mental ownership of the racetrack.
Is that the start of the season feels like it's now as well, the official sessions. This is where it counts, and he's got the whole track to himself, has Carlos Sainz. In fact, it's only the Ferraris and the Alpines that have bothered to go out on the green at all. Sainz, Leclerc, Ocon and Gasly on the track. What I like about this as well is we've had through the winter, I would say Alpine have not been looking very happy, and there's been a lot of chatter about them starting in a pretty bad place. So they're going to be one to look out for in Q1. The other 18 drivers, 19 principals, they've all got smiles on their face. They're all far too happy at this stage because they've, you know, the standard thing, we've made a lot of progress from last year. The regulations are pretty stable, so they can do that. And this is the time now where you see who's made the most progress because they're all moving in the right direction.
Yeah, well, this is the magical moment where some of those smiles will be wiped from their faces, because no matter what optimism you have through free practice, you never truly know what engine mode, what fuel level, which development parts they have on. You know right now this is the best all the teams are able to put on their race cars, the best they can give their drivers, and that's what they expect from their drivers as they attempt their best qualifying lap.
So the format, just a reminder for you, the format, 18 minutes on the clock. When it runs out, we're at 16 already. We will lose the 5 slowest drivers, then we will reset the clock and we will go again. The 4 drivers that are out there at the moment, all on the medium tyre. That's not the fastest compound, and Carlos Sainz is heading down to turn number 1. One of 3 Grand Prix winners last year at the Singapore Grand Prix. The other 2, the Red Bull pair of Perez and Verstappen.
Spotted the braking well. You would almost expect that maybe he'd be a little bit cautious on that very first run into turn 1, but the body language of that race car was full of confidence and aggression.
Fighting it coming out of turn 4. That's been a feature through the whole weekend, with a bit of wind kicking up as you go over that crest, and there's track limits in play on the exit of turn 4 as well, where a lot of drivers have been disregarding them through testing. Now it will count, so that's going to be, sadly, something to watch out for in this hour. I think the Alpines, I mean, speaking to members of the team this week, they'll be happy with Q2. That's the state of play with Alpine. So I think they've gone out straight away to get a side trim with a view to maybe doing 3 runs in this Q1 session. The Ferrari guys will definitely be hoping for maybe pole position here. They're that buoyant of their chances, so they're just trying to get an early banker in.
Yeah, early banker. Leclerc a little bit quicker in that first sector than his teammate, couple of tenths. That, when I say a little bit, that's significant today. Couple of tenths, you know, quite difficult to be able to make that up in the remaining sectors. And as I say that, Sainz has done exactly that. He's swung the pendulum back towards him, so it looks like it'll be nip and tuck for the opening first laps for the Ferraris.
Carlos Sainz comes across the line with a 1:31.208 set on the medium tyre. We go on board with Charles Leclerc, the man from Monaco, across the line, and he is half a tenth away from his teammate's benchmark. Charles Leclerc took his first ever pole position in Formula One around this circuit. Esteban Ocon will be the first of the drivers to cut the beam for Alpine, and he goes on a 1:31.9 on the medium tyre. Pierre Gasly follows his teammate across the line, and he's done a 1:32.4. To pick up on Jolyon Palmer's point from a few moments ago, the white lines, the rule is simple for track limits. If you put all 4 wheels off the racetrack beyond the white line at any stage of your lap, it does not count, it will be deleted, and sometimes that news comes through after we've had the checkered flag.
Yeah, that's not to sort of open old wounds of last year, but that is somewhat frustrating that we sometimes see that after the checkered flag, unless, of course, it's happened right at the checkered. But yeah, let's hope that we don't see too many of those questionable decisions, and we just see brilliantly exploited driving out on the track.
And it's happened immediately.
I'm glad we covered it. We saw it coming. We saw it coming. Pierre Gasly's lap time deleted for track limits at turn 13. Towards the end of the lap, 15 turns on this racetrack, and Gasly's time will be scrubbed from the board.
This is going to be such a big thing to watch out for in this qualifying, because the cars are able to take so much curb now, and the downforce is coming on. It means they can turn in with confidence from parts of this circuit that you wouldn't normally see into turn 11 that we've just flown through with Gasly here. They're crawling over the curb, they're going beyond the curb even, and the same is true on the entry to turn 4, right up to the white line with their inside front. They're taking so much curb, so the track limits rule then has to come into place, and Gasly is one of the well, he's the first one and one of 4 to have taken that straight away.
Well, that was like the trailers before the real movie. This is effectively the real start to the session. Welcome some of the best drivers in the world to the racetrack now. They've got the red walled soft tyres on. You can tell they're new from that sheen of the cars. And it's mobiles out, press record. And even though you might get the best view, you might be right on top of one of the drivers, you don't really convey the sheer aggressive nature, the juddering nature of a Formula One car leaving the pit lane.
Yeah, they're all stopping. Can I go or not? I don't want to stop.
Here we go again.
It's Max thinking that he'll just nip to the right and overtake them, and actually he's just a little bit uncertain as to whether he's allowed to do that or not.
Well, this came up last year, didn't it? Countless times. You're not allowed to go unnecessarily slowly once you hit the racetrack. So everyone's trying to give themselves a nice gap because 16 cars have all decided now is the moment to go and join the Alpines and the Ferraris, although they've now come into the pit. So that's why Ferrari went early, to avoid this bedlam. That was Gasly going over the track limits. And that was something we saw last year, and Max waiting in turn.
So not much for Pierre Gasly. From that onboard, it would have been not a huge amount over the white lines, but any amount over the white lines with all four wheels at any point of the circuit, lap deleted. Okay, effectively the start of the session then. Oscar Piastri at the start of his second Formula One season. His first very much went to plan. He scored in 11 races last year, scoring in 9 of the final 13 Grand Prix, looking to try and provide McLaren with something they've not had for a really long time, David. A good start to the season.
Yeah, and that's absolutely crucial, I think, just to endorse that you've actually designed and developed, and then delivered to the racetrack a good package, and then it gives you something really solid to build on. Very unusual last year. They were well outside the top 10 in qualifying, towards the back of the grid, and then we did see them bring it back later in the year. But crucially, you just lose confidence and you lose momentum if you can't deliver. It seems that they're talking that, yeah, this isn't a good track for us and we're not maybe as well positioned as we'd hoped for, but I never like when you're in that situation, because you're already sort of building blocks of negativity in your mind.
They do it every time, though. I mean, every race at the end of last year was not a good McLaren track. I don't remember coming to a circuit and they were like, we're going to be really good here. There's mentality in McLaren is to play things down. Maybe somewhere like Suzuka was definitely more of their circuit. In Qatar we saw it, but I don't think they were even particularly buoyant on the weekends there. They just managed to produce the goods, and they did it on circuits that weren't characteristically good for their car.
Now, we saw Piastri at low speed there, having to work the wheel a lot more than when we saw the offboard of Ferrari. So they tend to talk about this car being good at high speed, but struggling a bit with the lower speed corners. Well, I've never been to a racetrack other than maybe Indianapolis that you don't have low speed corners.
Yeah, it's a key tenet of the season. Alex Albon goes to the top of the timing page. It's a 1:30.6 for Albon, and he's done that on the soft tyre. Daniel Ricciardo is 0.3 of a second behind the Williams driver, so not the tidiest lap from the 8-time Grand Prix winner on the evidence so far. Norris is quicker in the first sector. Hulkenberg hits the front of the field.
Those are really good lap times for Hulkenberg and Albon. Hulkenberg has been flying this weekend in a Haas car that has been, again, another team with a lot of doom and gloom, but Hulkenberg's been lighting it up, and he's ahead of the two Williams for now. Everyone else on a lap time, and 20 drivers now out of the garage, even those that went early are now back out on soft tyres.
Alonso's first sector was good. It's been beaten by Max Verstappen. At the other end of the lap, Oscar Piastri, we followed him all the way round the 15 turns. He will bring it to the line. The DRS will open. Norris is going quickly in the middle part of the track, and Piastri finds himself behind a Williams and behind a Haas after run number 1. Let's cover things off with Lance Stroll, the Canadian driver. He's going to complete his lap. He's behind Logan Sargent, who is the second of the Williams, and it's going to be really interesting to see what Norris can do on this first run in relation to his teammate and the rest of the field. He's ahead of all of them by 0.4 of a second.
Not miles ahead of the Haas and the Williams, though, is he? And that was a nicely hooked up lap there from Norris. Alonso's going quickly as well, so this might get right up there with Lando.
So Alonso will go wheel to wheel with Lando Norris. He's 0.03 of a second behind, and here comes the world champion. Fastest in the first sector and ready to take first place, and he does so. He was being compared, don't panic, he was being compared to Esteban Ocon with that graphic. He's not beaten the rest of the field by a second. He's beat the field by 1/10 of a second. George Russell was P4.
That'll be tighter than you would really hope for. I know this is just the beginning of Q1, but the drivers have got more knowledge of this racetrack ahead of the Grand Prix than any other race they'll do this year, having completed the 1.5 days of testing last week and then all the 3 practice sessions.
That is a lackluster lap for Lewis Hamilton, who was looking really comfortable and really quick yesterday at this time of day in practice. He's gone behind Logan Sargent, over the line in 4th position, and not too far away from the benchmark pace, Sergio Perez, 2-time race winner last year. Here come the Ferraris. We're on board with Charles Leclerc, and now we're going to see he's not got much of the lap left. What can he do? Leclerc over the line, he goes P5. His teammate is the fastest driver of anyone out there in the middle part of the lap.
This is incredibly close for everyone now on a new set of soft tyres. Same state of play, all on track at the same time. It couldn't really be much closer, to the tune that Hamilton is going to be under big pressure. Having set the pace yesterday, he's dropped down to 12th.
Impressive stuff from Carlos Sainz, fastest driver out there, ahead of Max Verstappen. It's Ferrari, Red Bull, then McLaren, Aston Martin, 4 different teams in the top 4.
Yeah, so we can safely assume that Hamilton is going to go again, and that if we look where Russell is in 7th, Hamilton we can expect to, based on free practice, be a little bit quicker than Russell. So don't panic. I think he does have the performance, clearly just not had a clean lap.
Pressure's on though. There's going to be one more set of tyres for pretty much everyone now. The field's very, very tight, from Ricciardo in the clear to Zhou at the moment going out in Q1. There's half a tenth, and all the way up there's only a few tenths to Hamilton, to Piastri. There's some big names that are going to be in trouble in Q1 here.
Let's see what we can analyse by looking at the trackside cameras for Lewis Hamilton's car.
Well, he certainly gets the Sprinkler Award for putting out more sparks than anyone else.
The Mercedes runs so low, doesn't it?
That Mercedes was slow to move.
Hamilton slow to move.
A bit of muscle flexing from Logan Sargent early in the year.
Well, he's put on a bit of muscle. He was talking about being in the gym all the way through the weekend, and he finds himself at the moment in 11th place, still annoyingly for the American driver, heading into his 2nd season in Formula 1, behind his teammate. Alpine are last. Factory entry in Formula 1. They are 1.3 seconds off the pace. Not a disaster, but they are last, and for a factory entry, that is worst case scenario.
They only need a couple of tenths to get into Q2 at this rate, but it is looking terrible for them. It feels so close, and when you're at the back of it in 19th to 20th, they did that run on the mediums, run on the softs, and this is going to be some tough viewing in that garage.
Well, on the positive, and I know there's still a bit of this session to go, on the positive, the only way is up.
That's not really the way you want to start the season.
It's not.
The longest season in Formula 1. You're taking that positive, it's tough times.
Imagine saying that to DC, the driver. You'd be taking your life in your hands.
Yeah, easy to forget just how much it matters. Of course it matters. This is the pinnacle of circuit racing. The drivers there, it's difficult to get to Formula 1, even more difficult to stay there. And Ocon and Gasly, 2 talented drivers, and they signed to a manufacturer team, and right now it isn't giving them that manufacturer opportunity to deliver.
Both race winners, and they were actually warned pre-season that they'd missed their targets at Alpine and things were not going to be rosy straight away. I don't know if they saw themselves fighting to get off the back row of the grid with one set of tyres to go.
Well, on day 1 of testing, Alpine were fine. Day 2 of testing, Alpine were fine. When you go into the performance runs on day 3, it simply didn't materialise. And they were arguing in the paddock about whether they were 8th or 9th. And the worst predictions were they'd be on the back row of the grid. The good news for them is the track will continue to evolve. They will have an opportunity to make the second part of qualifying, but both of their drivers need really strong laps. You can't miss the Sauber this year, with the very, very luminous green livery for it. Joe is currently ahead of Valtteri Bottas. Bottas in 17th, a 2-time pole position holder around this circuit. And Kevin Magnussen, the sole Haas there, and his teammate is up in 8th. Very much the state of play that we saw last year, and Hülkenberg was the lead Haas on the grid 15 times compared to Magnussen's 7.
I don't agree with this.
We need to go. We are just checking the track evolution and all. Okay, so we need to make sure.
That's an interesting move for Charles Leclerc, going past the car, all four wheels in the slow lane of the pit lane, but that's a slightly delayed radio message, remember. That would be about 15 seconds in the past before you heard it.
And Leclerc's in 6th, so he's obviously feeling that he has to get out there and improve just in case. The track evolution at this circuit is always big. The temperature's cooling off ever more, the track rubbering in, and you can never rest on your laurels, even in the high position, which is why everyone has gone back out onto circuit at the moment, apart from Carlos Sainz, who stays in the garage. And some of those guys are going to be really hard pushed to get round for a flying lap, I'd say.
I love that expression, rest on your laurels, and I'm going to start a campaign to bring laurel wreaths back to the podium ceremony. I always see those great images from the 70s. And
yeah, we had Jackie Stewart down in the garage earlier on in free practice, and back in his era when he was winning 3 world titles, they'd get laurel leaves at the end. Part of an incredible history. This is season number 75 for Formula One, and we need to lose 5 drivers to form the final 5 places on the grid. You must improve at this stage of the session. That is an absolute minimum. Personal best in the first sector for Hulkenberg, for Albon. Also, for the drivers under pressure, Joe, Bottas and Magnussen are all improving. Magnussen, though, oh, Joe very nearly dropping it at the final corner. Bottas and Magnussen look quicker. That moment will have cost Joe a lot. It's 11th, but Bottas and Magnussen will really, really believe that they can beat that time. It has dropped Daniel Ricciardo into the drop zone, and look at who's 13th at the moment. Lewis Hamilton, then Lance Stroll. Yuki Tsunoda's the next driver at risk. Over the line comes Valtteri Bottas. Personal best for him to go ahead of his teammate. And what can Magnussen do? It's improve or head to the exit.
well, I tell you, Stroll's just gone fastest in the first sector, so you expect to see him move on up.
Sargent's in trouble in 14th, tumbling and not improving so far. The Alpines, Pierre Gasly hasn't started a flying lap yet. It's going to be so close with 5 seconds left.
Watch for the checkered flag graphic for Gasly. If he gets it, he will not be taking part. I think he just got over the line. Okay, now let's work out who we're going to see in the second part of qualifying. On board we go with Yuki Tsunoda, currently 17th, needs an improvement, finds an improvement, but remember, he's the first one to take the checkered flag, so others will have a chance to respond, starting with his teammate. Daniel Ricciardo gets himself up to 11th. Logan Sargent finds himself in the drop zone. So does Lewis Hamilton, who needs a lap, but he's on an improvement. Stroll goes to second place. That was tidy when he needed it most. Lewis Hamilton, 18th position, not what he wants at all, needs a lap to answer it. Here it comes, and he moves himself up to 10th place ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. He will breathe again. What about Ocon? What about Gasly? 2 Saubers in the drop zone. Logan Sargent in the drop zone, and we will find ourselves with the Alpines. Will they be able to progress into the next part of qualifying? They're setting personal best in the first sector, but they're looking for a leap forward compared to that first lap. Not by a tiny margin, by 6/10 of a second from run 1 to run 2. It is a tale of woe for the French manufacturer at the moment. 2 race-winning Grand Prix drivers. The drivers aren't in question, but they are trying to hustle a car around a circuit that does not have the performance. Ocon improves his lap time, not his position. Gasly's only fighting his teammate. It's a sorry state of affairs for Alpine. Here's the French Grand Prix winner over the line. He too improves his time and not his position. And for the second year in a row, Pierre Gasly will start the season from P20. And the glum faces say it all down at Alpine. Out in the first part of qualifying. 2 Saubers, Bottas ahead of Joe, Logan Sargent, and 2 Alpines. Ocon ahead of Gasly.
It is so close, the times around that bottom zone. Look at it on the left-hand side. Magnussen through to Ocon on the back row is 1/10 of a second. It's incredibly close, 10th and a half there. Gasly made a mistake somewhere in his lap, but these guys, this is going to be horrible for them to debrief here.
I'm sure someone's going to give me the information that a second covering the entire grid. Have we had?
Yeah, disaster out lap.
He was right at the back, wasn't he, Pierre, as the rest of them were trundling out. He only just made it by 1 second.
Yeah, that was tight. But have we ever had such a tight grid?
not at a circuit like this is the quick answer. We'll get you the definitive information, but not at a circuit like this. Sometimes at Austria, short circuit, not a lot of corners, we'll get a second. You're right, DC, a second from first to last. Unbelievable.
How many cars were within a second in the Spec Series F2?
No, it was a bigger spread. Yeah.
It's incredible, isn't it? All these guys have gone away over the winter, built up a car, all various differences across the board, and they're so evenly matched.
And we'll explain what we mean by that. F2, identical engine, identical chassis, and the only difference, the drivers, the engineers, and the mechanics. Here, they're constructing their own car.
Gap to P15 was a 10th, Pierre was P20.
Copy, guys. Only round one. We keep going. We keep pushing. There's a race to tomorrow as well, so I got faith in you guys. Got faith.
Wonderful, wonderful bit of leadership there. Actually, from Ocon, all credit for being mature enough to accept there's a bigger picture here. And actually, being a second away is nowhere near as bad as the position on the grid. They can develop back from that.
They've got a very heavy car and an underpowered car. Two major issues with trying to find your lap time. Got them straight away.
I don't know what happened.
Sargent dropping it off the curb was the onboard that we saw at turn 10. This is Joe Guan Yu's going to have a big moment at the final real corner of the racetrack.
So Sargent was already a little bit slow through the first sector. Joe just dropped onto that curb on the exit, and you can't get on the gas fully when you're breaking traction like that.
You know, great Sargent's just being open and honest, but in actual fact, what can a race engineer do with that information when a driver goes, I don't know what happened? Nothing.
Yeah. And the second season pressure is different to the patience that rookie was shown, and the American rookie was shown last year by Williams and team principal James Vowles.
He had a good first run as well, Logan, but you've got to improve. Everyone else is going to find a bit more time. The track gets better. You've got to go with it, and he just didn't improve his lap time, and that's why he's down in 18th.
That's nice to see. Sorry,
yeah, the camaraderie you're going to point out.
I was going to point out there's a little bit of an issue with the Alpine getting on the FIA scales, and they all leave mechanics down there with air blowers, and the Red Bull mechanic helping assist put some air through that car, because they obviously don't have fans to cool them when they're sitting. Then you get a big heat soak and surge when the car suddenly has to stop, and doesn't have the brake ducts and the brake fans and all of the other normal cooling devices available.
So 15 remain. Bottas, Joe, Sargent, Ocon and Gasly depart in the first part of qualifying. Slightly worrying for Joe Guan Yu. That's his fourth consecutive Q1 elimination. That is the longest run on the grid. Sargent was in 18th position. He was 14 thousandths of a second away from 16th position. So the tightness really does continue up and down the field. And here's a stat for one of us in the commentary box. Ocon and Gasly. It's the first time the Enstone team have been the two slowest cars in qualifying since Azerbaijan in 2016. And it was Kevin Magnussen. And who was the other driver?
Don't say it.
It was Jolyon Palmer.
I wouldn't have said it, Julian. I know we have to give factual information, but there's got to be a little bit of commentary box respect.
I'm so pleased that that has been broken, because the amount of times it's come up as a nearly moment, finally, it's no longer going to be relevant. The Baku 2016 misery that we had. Underpowered then, and we had a kilometre-long straight of just suffering to the line.
Ooh, that was the first year that Renault came back as a manufacturer. This is not their first year. The grand plans have been reset again and again and again. And
it's been a constant. It's been a constant through their time of winning races with Red Bull, that for whatever reason, and I can't believe it's financial, it must be philosophy. They haven't had what's been considered a top Formula One engine for several years.
yeah, it's absolutely true. And they've been talking about it, trying to get some equalisation, but it's not coming their way.
Yeah, equalisation, effectively, it's like, you know, balance of performance you have in sports cars. You handicap those that have exploited the regulations to greater effect to try and give a consistency of performance. But I don't think that's what Formula One represents.
No, they're the only team with the Renault engine now. We used to have the customer teams. Red Bull, when I was driving for Renault, were having the Renault engine as well, and were having problems with it, which is why they left. but they're probably missing a little bit of information coming back from the customer teams. Mercedes are supplying a few. RB have got the Honda power unit that's in the back of the Red Bull as well. You've got Ferrari customer teams. Renault are a little bit on their own, but they didn't used to be. They're on their own because no one else fancied that engine in the back.
Yeah, and they have invested so wonderfully over decades of motorsport, not only in Formula One, but at grassroots level. So, you know, as we criticise them, it's with a heavy heart, because I think that they are a consistent manufacturer that have invested heavily in motorsport.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've won this race, the Enstone-based team, in the 20-year history of the Bahrain Grand Prix. They took Fernando Alonso to both of his world championships. They've had some proud days in Formula One. This isn't one of them.
And there's much chatter that they could be 10 or even 11 kilos overweight to start this season. And weight has been a big issue in this generation of car, but the other teams have managed to lose that through 3 years of stable regulations. And this year, Alpine have just got nowhere near the weight. If you took that out, if they could somehow find a way of reducing the weight in the coming races, then Ocon's time would put him almost in the top 10. It's that close. So there are definitely ways that they're going to be able to improve without finding a whole heap of aerodynamic gains. But it's easier said than done to do that. They've already not painted the car.
Yeah, and also cost cap means that, yes, you could try and redesign the exact same part but in a different material. That has a cost applied to it, and with the cost cap, you simply are not able to over the course of a season.
We're looking down at the Mercedes garage for the time for them to join the racetrack. There is a green light at the end of the pit lane. We are up and running once again for the 15 minutes of Q2. They're taking their time. 12 minutes remain in the session. The car's crawling onto the racetrack once again. And if you think it was close before, it is going to be fine margins to get into the top 10 shootout and Q3.
Yeah, we had a Ferrari at the top, a Red Bull, Aston Martin in there, McLaren in there, all at the top on both runs of that Q1 session. No Mercedes. They were up against it to get into the top 10 there in the hands of Lewis Hamilton on the second run. Maybe he's having to be a bit cautious because the first run wasn't there, but it's certainly not been the start of qualifying that they had hoped for after they were flying this time yesterday.
Yeah, it's not what I expected. I thought they would be, you know, easily top 5 right from the off the bat. But you mentioned earlier there's track evolution. The session will continue to evolve. So we're getting indications of performance, but the only one that really matters is Q3 checker flag.
And how about Haas getting both cars through?
Yeah. Personnel change over the winter. Günther Steiner, a charismatic team boss, in downright disagreement with team owner Gene Haas. So he exited the team after 8 seasons as the team principal. And a change there. Komatsu has taken over, and they spent all of testing trying to understand things for their race pace. They are trying to make the tyres last longer into a Grand Prix, and if they can do that, Hülkenberg has proved that over 1 lap he can fight his way through. Magnussen has got through into the next part of qualifying, and that is his aim. He's now looking to try and deliver around this racetrack. A couple of years on from his amazing Super Sub appearance, where he didn't expect to be a Formula One driver, and then he ended up finishing 5th in the first race of the year. It was a fairy tale moment for this driver, who scored a podium in his very first Grand Prix outing and has never been back there since. But he's trying to tackle turn number 8, trying to put a time on the board that can see him through into the 3rd part of qualifying, and that would be pretty good if he was able to do so, and it would be a little bit of a turn up as well, because all the times that he made Q3 last year, and there was 3 opportunities, all street tracks, not permanent facilities like this one.
Yeah, this is now, I'm not sure if you call it a classic Grand Prix in terms of layout of the track, but 20 races here, it's certainly sort of backbone of the Formula One World Championship. It's a curious little track to drive, actually, isn't it? There's not really, you know, sort of standout corners when we'd name an Eau Rouge or a Beckett section. Quite a few twiddly little slow-speed corners, but there's certainly a rhythm that you have to build up here to achieve the lap time.
I quite liked it, this circuit. I raced in the night, you raced in the day when it was here as well, and I feel like it changes the whole feel of the place when it's under lights. Everything feels a little bit more special. But it's got a nice rhythm, it's got a nice undulation as well that you don't really see from these cameras.
Early laps being put on the board. Norris goes ahead of Piastri, 29.9 for 30.6. So a big gulf there on lap number 1. Kevin Magnussen's time has been deleted for track limits. Lance Stroll has gone into 3rd. You see Magnussen tumble away on the left-hand side for that track limits infraction. Hulkenberg's time good enough for 4th, and Hulkenberg's time ahead of Daniel Ricciardo and marginally behind Lance Stroll. Fernando Alonso was the lead Aston Martin on the grid 19 times last year. You would expect him to be ahead of Lance Stroll. How close can he get to the benchmark set by Lando Norris? As we see confirmation of Magnussen's time being deleted by race control, the 2-time world champion is into 2nd place with the fastest final sector of the session so far.
New tyres for Alonso. It was effectively new tyres for Norris because he aborted at the end of Q1, didn't need to improve. And there's new tyres also for the Red Bulls. Sainz crosses the line and he is on a used set still. So just one set of tyres, one set of soft tyres so far in qualifying.
Here is the 2nd Ferrari. Charles Leclerc, winner of this race from pole position in 2022, goes into 2nd position. And it's Norris, then Leclerc, then Alonso, Sainz and Piastri. The world champion about to get into the mix and about to take the fastest time by half a second. Perez will immediately respond. Can he make it a Red Bull 1-2 across the line? The answer to that question is yes. It is Verstappen, Perez, Norris, Leclerc and Alonso with the Mercedes to come.
A much bigger scatter of lap time, so almost indicating that I don't know if the wind has picked up or something that's making it more difficult for the drivers to get the consistency out of their first laps.
Hamilton into 6th place, George Russell only 9th. Mercedes not showing the form that they did one day ago when we had FP2 and they were at the front of the field in that practice session, and we're getting the reality of what the drivers have underneath them.
Pole time last year, Max Verstappen, 1 minute 29.7. In Q2, first run, he's 4 tenths quicker than that. It's going to come even further down. That's track limits for Magnussen. I didn't think we'd get it at turn 7, but lo and behold, we have.
Yeah, he's clearly trying to carry too much speed through the second part of that high-speed chicane, and you would have thought you would have felt and lifted earlier than run the risk of running out onto the rumble strip.
It actually slows you down doing that. It's very bumpy, as you saw, and then you struggle to get back to the left-hand side for turn 8. It's difficult once you have to back out of that part as well. The lap is gone. Russell sliding. That's the classic out of turn 4, and I think he just stayed within track limits.
Yeah, a moment for George Russell, who will be investigated after the session for failing to follow the race director's instruction on the maximum delta time around the circuit. That is prescribed before the weekend begins, so that we don't trigger DC here and we get the thing that he cannot stand, which is cars static on the racetrack, while others are pushing on.
Yeah, he needs a mitigating circumstance, doesn't he? And I'm sure there will be one. Car coming up in a critical area where he had to get out of the way so as not to impede.
There's Lance Stroll 1 year ago. Heroic performance to score points with broken wrists and a broken toe. He's trying to find the answer to closing down the gap to 5th place. That's where his teammate sits as George Russell comes back at an angle for his team. And here's the 2nd Mercedes. It's different livery they've got for this year. They've got the silver nose and they've got the rest of the black bodywork, and that's the livery. The car, a totally different concept as they abandon the one they started the new regulations in 2022. They've had to go the way of the rest of the field, and it's cost them 2 years of competition.
Yeah, no lap time in livery, but good to know they changed the concept slightly, and they do seem overall to see more potential in this package. So at various points through free practice they've been setting the pace.
And Hamilton's lap there is better as well. That's a used tyre for Lewis Hamilton. He's actually gone quicker than he did in Q1 still. So the track's getting better, but that Mercedes may be starting to find a little bit more form.
And if you are wondering, I'm not sure we covered it off, but if you are wondering if the Red Bulls were on a new set, they were. Decrease your panic. It's still going to be close at the end of this one. It is still going to be right in the balance. Look at the elimination zone for progression into the final part of qualifying. Hulkenberg trying to find 1/100th of a second to improve. You've got Tsunoda ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. Interesting dynamic down at RB, the new name for AlphaTauri this year. You've got Tsunoda in his 4th season of Formula 1. No excuses available anymore, and Daniel Ricciardo trying to fight his way to the senior team, knowing that Sergio Perez is out of contract at the end of this year. One of 13 drivers out of contract at the end of this year.
Yeah, I think that just on that, of course, we mature into our driving careers, but I don't think that you never give a driver leeway on pace, on outright pace. They either can drive quickly or they can't. In terms of putting together Grand Prix weekends and having the experience of dealing with the pressure, the media demands, the travel, of course you find your rhythm as the years go on. And that's why typically when somebody shows potential but then that isn't borne out, they might get 3 seasons out of Formula One.
We'll see whether it continues. We're on board with Charles Leclerc exiting the pits with the entirety of the 15 left in qualifying.
The guys in front of Carlos are stopping. We are not allowed to stop normally.
Understood, we'll report that.
He's irritated, isn't he? I know it was said in a nice way, but he was in the previous part of qualifying as well. He was questioning. It just gives me the sense that he's slightly not settled in his mind at race 1. Now, is that because he feels he's on the back foot relative to Carlos, and this is normally this is his domain, isn't it, qualifying? He normally owns that.
He does. Since the Japanese Grand Prix last year, he really turned a page. They brought an update to the car, and since then he was always fighting in Q3 to try and take pole position. The last 5 races of the season, Charles Leclerc on the front row. So this is his time to shine. He's got a lot of pole positions in his Formula One career, 23 of them to be exact. He's not enjoying that procedure out of the pit lane.
I do think Carlos has looked the quicker of the two, and actually from the first moment they started driving this car last week, they were sharing one Ferrari. I think Carlos maybe looked the more composed in it, and we would typically say that Charles would be the stronger one-lap driver. Definitely wouldn't rule him out still putting it on pole in Q3. He's got that in him, but he's not looking 100% dialed in just yet. His time at the moment in Q2 here is done on effectively a new tyre with Sainz on a one-lap used.
Alex Albon continues the run over Logan Sargent. He will be the lead Williams on the grid for the 23rd race in a row. This is a 24-race season, longest ever in Formula One history. We're visor cam down to turn number 1.
There's no one really that's outside the top 10 right now that you think should absolutely be in the top 10. That doesn't mean we're not going to see a change. We know Hulkenberg can pull a lap time, maybe Albon, but otherwise it does kind of feel like that could have been a finishing order.
Yeah, big first sector for Alexander Albon to show that there's improvement to be found there. The driver who is currently in 14th position, 0.3 of a second up with a bit of a correction as he applies the power coming out of turn 8. 0.3 of a second up on Lance Stroll, who's also improving.
Stroll's 10th place time at the moment is a second slower than he did in Q1. So the benchmark that you're seeing is going to be beaten fairly convincingly by everyone. It's a little bit deceptive at the moment. Albon sweeping it into turn 11. He's looked really, really on it in this Williams. Now he squeezes on the throttle. A little tweak of the brake balance as he comes up this blind crest, and there's a car that's going to jump out of the way. Looked like a Haas.
Total improvement from the entire field through Sector 1. Everyone has posted a personal best, and once again the requirement to take a step forward under pressure is going to separate those who exit and those who advance to the top 10 shootout. Piastri has gone up to 6th place. Where can Alexander Albon go? He'll go into 8th. A good effort, but it will leave him vulnerable.
Monster lap from Nico Hulkenberg.
Yeah, phenomenal lap time from Hulkenberg. He's second. He's second in the order. Over the line goes Stroll. He goes to 8th. Albon down to 9th. Hamilton at risk in 10th position. Here's a driver who could knock Hamilton out for a second. It's Daniel Ricciardo who does so. Daniel Ricciardo to 10th position. He's beaten Hamilton by 0.08 of a second. Sainz is currently in 12th, but he's got the fastest middle sector. He's got the second fastest time now. He's behind only Verstappen, and now it's Ricciardo in the drop zone, along with Hamilton, Magnussen, and the second Mercedes of Russell, Tsunoda, with a good lap time to get up to 8th position, and the Japanese driver will be the lead RB on the grid. Charles Leclerc is in 6th. Now 7th, because Alonso has gone up to 3rd. Mercedes need a couple of laps.
They're both out there and they're both finding a bit of pace. Hamilton 13th and Russell 15th. They were so late out. They're only halfway through this lap.
That's the fastest time from Charles Leclerc, and the crowd enjoyed that one, getting a roar from the grandstand. Long part of the lap still to go for Mercedes to get themselves into the top 10 shootout.
Huge amount of pressure. If there's any of the display boards around the track, and I think there is one where you can down the back straight, they will probably have a glance and know that they're both currently out and have to get a clean lap.
Look at that margin for George Russell. He is in arrears right now compared to Lance Stroll, who is the 10th fastest qualifier as it stands. Contrast that with Hamilton, who is up.
Hamilton's had loads of traffic. They've both had to deal with slowing down cars as well. Russell sliding coming out of the final corner.
Russell to the flag, needs an improvement. Currently in 15th. George Russell comes over the line and goes to 6th. That was a great final sector when he really needed it. Stroll is eliminated. Hamilton currently 14th. Hamilton finds his way to 4th to knock out Yuki Tsunoda at the end. Tsunoda out by 7 thousandths of a second. Mercedes sat for well over a minute there under pressure of the exit. Hamilton gets through in 4th. Russell gets through in 7th. Tsunoda, Stroll, Albon, Ricciardo and Magnussen go out in the second part of qualifying, and progression or the exit separated by 7 thousandths of a second.
Again, tight margins. The irritated Charles Leclerc plonked it to top spot, didn't he? By a couple of tenths in all of that as well. But what a job from Hülkenberg. 6th quickest, like for like with everyone in the Haas. That's an incredible job.
Yeah, that is super impressive, and it follows the form he's had the last couple of years, actually, of delivering when needed.
Okay, Yuki P11 was not a bad lap.
Yeah.
Well, that sigh tells you all you need to know. That is blink of an eye stuff, 7 thousandths of a second. Charles Leclerc top, ahead of Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz. Got a battle for pole on our hands, but Tsunoda, along with his teammate Daniel Ricciardo, have dropped. Stroll, Albon, and then Magnussen as well. And Magnussen, with a new car, would have been hoping that there would have been a different story over one lap pace. There's still a gulf. And Hülkenberg, as he did 8 times last year in Formula 1 2023, has booked his place in the top 10 in the final part of qualifying.
Yeah, you've got to say that's the single most impressive thing of that part of qualifying. Hülkenberg seems to find a way of making that car deliver lap times over 1 lap. The big question, which we'll get answered tomorrow, irrespective of where he ends up on the grid, is have they found consistency? Because they used to eat their rear tyres. And I think Nico is a driver that relies heavily on a slightly looser rear, will make it more difficult to keep that tyre life as long through a Grand Prix. But having done what I consider one of the more difficult parts, you know, exploiting a qualifying lap, you'd think he'd be able to find a way to drive within himself to get more consistency over the Grand Prix.
Hülkenberg's best starting position at this racetrack is 7th place. So anytime he breaks the top 6 in a segment of qualifying with a team that finished 10th in the Constructors' Championship last year, well, that is to be very much applauded. If he recreates that in a couple of moments' time, in a couple of minutes' time, well, that would be the best he's ever managed around this circuit.
Yeah, well, we're moments away from what I find to be one of the best parts of a Grand Prix weekend in terms of the drivers showing what they can do behind the wheel of a Grand Prix car. They'll have maximum engine mode, lowest amount of fuel, brand new set of tyres. They're not going to know more about this racetrack in sort of knowledge of how the track's evolved than at this moment. And it's about seeing human and machine in perfect harmony. Some do it better than others. My gut feeling going into it was that Carlos had the upper hand on Charles on this weekend, but it does look like Charles is starting to find comfort and form right when it matters. And can Verstappen react to that? It's looking like Hamilton's a little bit on the back foot relative to maybe what we saw in free practice, but yeah, underestimate him at your peril as well.
Absolutely. Couple of fans there of Lewis Hamilton, start him young. There in the grandstand. There's a great atmosphere around this circuit. McLaren were talking their chances down. And you see that Lando Norris making it in by about just under 0.2 of a second. They were 9th and 10th in the last session. And so this will be very, very interesting. Charles Leclerc led Q2 1 year ago, qualified 3rd on the grid. It is quite rare that the three of us tip different drivers to be on pole position. All three of us went for someone different, but all three of us went for someone who's currently in the top 3 after that last session. So we're not a million miles away, which is good to know.
Are we declaring who took who?
Well, I went for Charles Leclerc, Jolien went for Max Verstappen, and
Who did I go for then? Carlos Sainz.
And you went for Carlos Sainz, and we will see. We will see in a few moments' time. It's going to be very interesting. Just to keep you up to date with the track temperature, it's 21 degrees. DC has a very fetching blazer that he's having to wear, but it's required. It's freezing out there compared to normal. The air temperature is only 17 degrees, but it feels cooler.
Yeah, I have a scarf on as well, which is not something I often wear at Grand Prix.
What's going on?
It's cold. It is. There's a nip in the air. Strong winds coming off the Gulf, and yeah, the sun has struggled to break through and put all that lovely heat into the tarmac. So cooler conditions, different challenges, but Formula One is exactly about that. How do you build a car for all seasons? And that means different weather conditions across that season.
Right, it's very nearly time to get our first real big answer to the questions of who's going to step forward. It is Leclerc versus Verstappen versus Sainz, with an incredible lap from another driver to try and get in the mix as well, but it looks to be a 3-car battle. You see the banner there on the main grandstand. We're on the top row of that main grandstand speaking to you. And it's 20-year anniversary of the first Bahrain Grand Prix, a Grand Prix you were in, David. We've been talking of teams not having the best start. McLaren didn't have a ripper of a car at the start of 2004, and you had to bide your time until they came up with a B-spec version, which in the cost cap era you couldn't do.
Yeah, absolutely. Back in those days, you had entire test teams. You'd have 2 cars out running every single week in between Grand Prix racing. Actually, a part of Formula One I really enjoyed. We had less Grand Prix, but I was always fascinated with the engineering minds and technical developments. And I haven't seen anyone really dancing in the grandstands before. So as Bahrain celebrates 20 seasons of Formula One racing, it is the party has started.
It certainly has. Someone's going to be showing us their moves on the track in a few moments' time. We're going to ramp things up. Max Verstappen has won 17 of the last 18 races. He was on pole here last year. Charles Leclerc has taken 5 pole positions last season. He's been on the front row for the last 5 Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz, in his Formula One career, has been on pole position on 5 occasions, and they're racing already.
Yeah, almost a bit of up-close contact there between Max Verstappen and George Russell as they were jockeying for position. Lewis Hamilton lining up behind Max. And yeah, now this will seem obvious, but this is going to take a perfect lap to get pole out of the cars that have that sort of performance. Anything less, then you could find yourself on the second row.
Yeah, high stakes at one of the most exciting parts of a Formula One weekend. The final part of qualifying is underway. The green light is illuminated, the cars heading to the racetrack to decide the grid for the opening Grand Prix of Formula One in 2024. We have our contenders. Maybe the only surprise that we have Hülkenberg in the mix. We have the 2 Red Bulls, we have the 2 Ferraris, the 2 Mercedes. We have Alonso for Aston Martin. We have Hülkenberg for Haas as well. And there are the previous pole positions around this circuit. Verstappen last year, Charles Leclerc the year before that. Verstappen in 2021 put on an amazing Grand Prix, dueling with Lewis Hamilton, who took pole in 2020. And Charles Leclerc's first ever pole position, the first of 23, came around this circuit back in 2019. If Ferrari do take pole today, in season 75 of Formula One, it would be their 250th Formula One pole position. Quite literally one for the record books.
Yeah, it's a fantastic record, and getting pole positions has never really been Ferrari's issue. It's having race wins over a consistent period of time. They've had those purple patches, you know, the Schumacher era and the likes, where they really were the dominant team. But speed has not been missing from that team the last few years in single lap. It's the Grand Prix distance that they need to master.
It's absolutely right. It's what they were spending all 3 days of testing trying to get on top of. It's the aim of their car heading into this year. They know they've got the one-lap pace. They know they've got 2 brilliant drivers. They're adding a 3rd brilliant driver in 2025 when Lewis Hamilton replaces Carlos Sainz. We'll be talking about that all year long. First of all, though, George Russell has gone out early. He's dictated things. The driver who was on the back foot earlier on, wondering whether he would even make this session, trying to push on at a racetrack where he first raced for Mercedes when he was a super sub here in 2020. Now the challenge, having been with the team for a while, the start of his 3rd season with the team, knowing that Hamilton is leaving at the end. This is a huge season for George Russell to take ownership of the team, and it starts with this qualifying lap.
It does, and as he navigates his way through some of the slower sections of the lap, I think Lewis Hamilton was asked in the press conference whether he felt George was ready to step up as team leader, and I can't say it was exactly a glowing endorsement of where he felt he was. He said he was good technically, he'd gained a lot of experience since he was at Williams, and he was very close to Toto. It kind of left some questions.
Well, Russell is going to have to answer those questions with this lap and his performance across the entire year. He is a Grand Prix winner, scored Mercedes' only Grand Prix victory in the last 2 seasons. That is a team that before that had taken 8 consecutive championships of the world in the Constructors' Championship for those who put the car together, where the prize money is handed out. And he has 1 corner to go of the circuit. His first effort in qualifying Q3 is complete. This is what it looks like when you come across the line, and it is a 1:29.6 to marginally go ahead of Norris, then Hülkenberg. Verstappen fastest in the first sector, personal best in the middle, and he goes ahead of George Russell by less than 0.2 of a second.
Yeah, that's within Hamilton's striking distance. So if Hamilton's able to get his lap together, as we're about to find out,
goes up to 4th, behind Norris, behind his teammate, behind his old rival, Max Verstappen. Sergio Perez to 4th position, ahead of Hamilton. But behind Norris and Russell, we await the 2 Scarlet Ferraris. This is the man who is top of FP3, the final practice session. Before this moment, can Sainz get himself to the front row? The answer is no. And now we've got a question with Charles Leclerc. Can he follow up? Can he put the pressure on? The answer is 2nd place. It's Verstappen, Leclerc, Russell, Sainz and Norris. The world champions on top by a fine margin of 59 thousandths of a second, by 500ths of a second. It's super close once again in Formula One qualifying.
it is fantastic as we see Carlos Sainz's Scottish girlfriend there. I don't want to seem overly patriotic, but he's found love north of the border, and he's going to have to muster all of that to overcome the speed of his teammates.
Oh, wonderful stuff. I was waiting for the reference, and he did not disappoint. Neither have the top five. Well, this is fascinating stuff. Hamilton's a second off. His teammates just shy of 0.2 of a second off.
Yeah, so Hamilton, there's something happened on that lap. We know he's sort of trading with George Russell. I would say that this could be a five-way battle, and maybe being a little bit unfair to Lando Norris, who's only 2.5 tenths away, but I'm putting Hamilton in that battle between Verstappen, Leclerc, Russell and Sainz as well. And as I said earlier, it's going to take the perfect lap to get the pole.
Brilliantly poised, phenomenally poised. This is exactly what we love about Formula One, and what a way to start the season. Guy enter into the competition, a two-time champion of the world, a former winner of this Grand Prix. It is Fernando Alonso who has decided to do something different. This is effectively running in the gap. Everyone else is switching their tyres. He is out on track. Here's Russell.
Right, it's really poor turn 6, almost lost it.
Okay, good feedback. Not much the team can do other than tyre pressures. Otherwise, at this stage, you're committed with your mechanical setup. You can do a wing adjustment, a little bit of a tyre pressure adjustment within the Pirelli limitations. You do get slight variations in fuel set to set, which sometimes can come to you or drop away depending what your balance is. So this is now an opportunity for Fernando Alonso, who's chosen to go very late with one run to put a time on the board. Can he cause an upset? If anyone can, he certainly can.
Fernando Alonso has not been on pole position since Germany 2012 is the sentence I was attempting there. 191 races ago.
Well, I had dark hair back in those days. That was a long time ago, but somehow he's age-defying in terms of outright pace. His teammate, Lance Stroll, still doesn't seem to have an answer for it.
No, last year Alonso was the lead Aston Martin on the grid 19 times compared to Lance Stroll. It's a clean couple of corners to start the lap. He's into one of 3 DRS zones around this circuit. How far is he prepared to push the limit on the exit of 4?
Well, he's got the racetrack all to himself. As we can hear from our commentary box, cars starting to go down the pit lane. But this is a display of Spanish talent in that beautiful Aston, missing the apex a little bit as he dropped down into turn 8. Let's see how much that's cost him. 28.8 opening sector, that's 3/10 down on the fastest sector, so this isn't going to be a pole position lap.
Fernando Alonso has started at the front of the field here in the past. Alonso trying to fight his way back there once again. Back in 2005, he was at the front of the field for the Bahrain Grand Prix, but he's off in the first sector. The middle sector, though, is absolutely mighty. And that was with, on this lap, he missed the apex of 8. He wasn't on the limit at 4. In the middle part of the lap, where the driver makes the difference, Fernando on fire.
Yeah, the Matador is showing that he's still got the fight in him. It's still a couple of tenths shy of the best middle sector of qualifying so far, but a brilliant lap.
What a superb performance to run in the gap. Fernando Alonso gets to 3rd position. An outstanding lap when the track would have been at its best at any point of the day so far. If anyone brings out a yellow flag or an interruption here, Alonso and Aston Martin have called the tactics perfectly. For everyone else, if this runs green flag session, Alonso will be vulnerable, but Aston Martin, interesting thinking, decided to go in that direction. Alonso, wow, that middle sector was special.
It was indeed, and I think it shows the confidence of Fernando and the trust the team have in him to do a very different qualifying one plan.
This is not ideal for Oscar Piastri, who is building up to 200 miles per hour as the Ferraris and the Red Bulls come out of the pits, and there's no one in the way of the Australian driver on the racetrack, but surely that is a smidge distracting.
It is indeed, because you don't know there's no one in the way until you actually get to the point where they might be. But Ferrari drivers, impeccable sportsmanship, no question, they have not impeded him in any way.
So Piastri pushing on now. The 9th best qualifier on average last year, personal best on the grid of a superb performance in Suzuka. His first visit to Suzuka, hugely demanding circuit, and he put it second. He put it on the front row behind only Max Verstappen. Lando Norris's first sector, nowhere near the improvement that he wanted to, not even a personal best, and 3.5 tenths of a second behind Verstappen's benchmark time. So disappointing opening to the lap for the Brit, Lando Norris.
Yeah, but only marginally behind Piastri. So the McLaren isn't performing as we get into the final part of this qualifying session. Hulkenberg is nip and tuck with the McLaren, so he may have an opportunity to move forward. We're staring at the timing screens, looking to see a purple. Is anyone going to give us a first sector improvement?
We're waiting as well for the Red Bulls and the Ferraris. Sainz finds himself pushing on. It's Norris with the purple sector across the line. Here's his teammate to register a time on the board. Piastri goes up to 7th place. Max Verstappen has inadvertently been given a lovely toe to push on and start his lap. Lando Norris, fastest of anyone in the middle sector, and he gets an improvement of lap time, but not position. He finds himself in 6th place, and we will wait for the push laps to start for the contenders at the front. No improvement for Hulkenberg, who's in 10th position. He peels out of the way, and that's a handy toe as well for the Ferrari.
That's given Sainz a little bit of a toe down to first corner. We saw Verstappen doing it, but the risk in trying to achieve it was he had to run off onto the dirty line.
Great first sector for Max Verstappen. We're on board with George Russell, heading into the left-hander of turn 11, climbing the hill now. Verstappen has done a 28.5 in the first sector. Charles Leclerc at 28.7.
and both Mercedes 28.8. So not looking like Mercedes are going to challenge for the front row, assuming the others complete their laps, well, unless they make a big step forward. Does seem to be that middle sector. A number of drivers are finding a big step forward. Alonso did it. We had Lando Norris do it as the checker flag's out.
George Russell across the line, great final sector, and he needed it to go up to third position. Here is Lewis Hamilton across the line. He's only up to 8th. He couldn't find the pace of his teammate, and he will be the second Mercedes on the grid tomorrow. Max Verstappen looking good across the line, lowering the benchmark. It's a 1:29.1 for Max Verstappen, who has just thrown down the gauntlet and said you need to find an improvement of 0.3 of a second if you're going to deny me the opening pole position of the year. Across the line comes Charles Leclerc. He can't find it despite an improvement of time, and it's all down to Sainz and Perez now. Sainz improves to 4th place. Verstappen, Leclerc, Russell and Sainz. Perez will try and get to the front row. It's 5th place for the Mexican driver across the line, and after a great battle, when the wick was turned up, when it was all decided, the world champion steps forward once again. Max Verstappen takes pole position number 33 in his career, and he will start Formula One in 2024 from the front of the field.
Brilliant, used all of his experience, his confidence to deliver. It wasn't easy, and that lap time, there is not a big difference, is there? Right down to Norris, only 3:10s covering. I think we're going to be set up for some cracking racing tomorrow.
Charles Leclerc getting ahead to the front row. That is 6 Grand Prix in a row now. The man from Monaco has managed to put that Ferrari on the front row of the grid. He is once again going to be alongside Max Verstappen. George Russell, the lead Mercedes, excellent performance for him. And then Sainz in 4th, just behind his teammate Sergio Perez with that last lap across the line. And Fernando Alonso's tactic to run in the gap, well, it beat the McLarens, it beat Lewis Hamilton and Hülkenberg.
It was enough, Max. It was enough. Well done.
I'm so sorry, GP.
Nothing to be sorry about, Max. Very good start. That was 2/10 clear of Charles and 3/10 clear of George.
Yeah, well, we think we did very well in that qualifying to get the most out of it. So thank you to everyone. Well done. Well done.
Julian's going to have to ask some follow-up questions there because he was apologising, Max Verstappen, to Gianpiero Lambiase on the radio, explaining, oh, I'm so sorry. What about? We'll find out. P1 for car number 1, Max Verstappen picking up where he left off. He remains the driver to beat, and he has the clearest view at the start of the season tomorrow for the first